Welcome to the podcast, Amazing Tales from Off and On Connecticut's Beaten Path. I'm your host, Mike Allen. How do you spell basic? Is it C-A-S-B-I? Well, if you were today's guest, that just might be how you put it into the daily Jumble word puzzle to try to fool the rest of us by scrambling around the letters. Our guest today is David L. Hoyt. He spends most of his waking time thinking about word puzzles, clues for existing games. He has to come up with puzzle clues for several puzzles every single day, and new puzzles that he creates all the time that challenge our skills. He is the leading syndicated word puzzle producer in this country, and David is a native of Connecticut. He's going to be along in just a moment to share his background in this state, as well as give us insights into what his life in the world of word puzzles looks like. This week's trivia question: he delivered the peace treaty to General Pershing in World War I, dodging German bullets while speeding along on his motorcycle. Who was he? Stick around after the main program for the answer, because then you're going to know the topic for next week's show. Amazing Tales from Off and On Connecticut's Beaten Path is brought to you by our sponsor, Yale New Haven Health. When people need the best quality health care, there's a reason they turn to Yale New Haven Health. In 1826, Yale New Haven Hospital became Connecticut's very first hospital. They were the first hospital in the U.S. to use chemotherapy. Yale New Haven was the first to introduce insulin pumps for diabetic patients, and they introduced the world's first intensive care unit for newborns. For more information about Yale New Haven Health, visit ynhhs.org. That's ynhhs.org. Well, it turns out that we humans love puzzles. We've been doing them at least since the 1st century BC. That's when archaeologists say they found a satyr square puzzle in the unearthed ruins of Pompeii. But by the mid-1800s, a definition for the word puzzle was actually developed and published, and it went like this: a toy to test one's ingenuity. Well, it was in the 1800s that the journalist was born in England. He came here to the U.S. in 1890, and his name was Arthur Wynne. He hailed from Liverpool, England. It was about 110 years ago, in 1913, that his invention was published in the newspaper The New York World. And that invention, we call it a crossword puzzle. Newspapers have always realized that it's important to attract readers through puzzles, and in 1954, a new one hit the papers called Scramble. By 1962, the word game Scramble had been renamed to Jumble, and it became a mainstay over many decades. Now, about 10 years ago, the baton for creating Jumble was handed over to a Connecticut native, David L. Hoyt. He's our guest today, and he's going to tell us about his history with puzzles and how he got involved in the business. And let me tell you, it's a crazy story. Today, he not only does Jumble, the word game that's syndicated in more U.S. newspapers than any other in the country, but he also does two for USA Today on a daily basis: Word Roundup and Up and Down Words. Over the past 10 years, David's created at least 4,000 daily Jumble puzzles alone. Now, you might think to be at the zenith of this business as David is, you had to study puzzles from the day you were born. Well, in fact, as a kid in Connecticut, David really wanted to build a perpetual motion machine. That's right, he wanted to be an inventor. And he also had a stint as an options trader in Chicago before he started down his current path, which is incredible by any definition. David, I want to start off by asking about the pressure that comes with doing a daily puzzle like this. Now, you're talking to somebody who's addicted to your Jumble word game, for starters, right? So every day I expect to get up and find a challenging puzzle every day. I assume at some point in your mind that, it's something you probably think about.
Yeah, making these every day is quite the challenge. And, I just don't want to repeat stuff. My favorite part of being the Jumble author is coming up with new puzzles. In fact, I was up at about 4 a.m. this morning and I came up with something that, I couldn't believe I hadn't thought of it before. It makes me so happy. I feel like I hit a grand slam this morning coming up with an idea that I probably should have thought of over the last 20 years. And it's very fun for me to think about the solver, to think about coming up with something that is as wonderful for them to play, as wonderful for me to make.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that because I often wonder where all these great ideas come every time I see a new game, and that's it. I mean, you wake up one morning and a light bulb goes off, which is just incredible. Let's talk about when you were a kid. So you were born in Waterbury. Tell us a little bit about that and what childhood was like with you and puzzles.
Well, I was born in Waterbury, right there in Waterbury Hospital, right up the hill on Route 8, so you could see it very easily where I was born, and my dad was born there. And, when I was an infant, we lived in Waterville, and then we moved to Watertown. My first memory as a child is from Watertown. And then my parents had a chance to move closer to my dad's job, and they really wanted to go to a place with a good education system. And, even though they didn't have a lot of money, we moved to Cheshire, Connecticut. And Cheshire had a great school system, and there was a little teeny apartment complex down the street from the Chapman School. And I was able to, walk to school in 1 minute. And it got my education off to an incredible start. Like, I loved going to school. I loved my teachers. I loved my fellow students. And it just made me want to learn. And then we ended up moving from the apartment when I was in the 4th grade to Southington, which also had a very good education system. Like, I was excited to go to school and just couldn't wait to learn. And I'm very thankful, that my parents, chose, a place to live, and had checked out the education system of schools in the area. But I feel very, very kind of proud, to be educated in Connecticut.
When I was a kid, my dad used to bring home the newspaper every night, and Jumble was in it. Now, this is before you did it, but this is back when I was a kid. And it was something that was part of me from an early age. I'm just wondering, did you used to do a crossword puzzle as a kid, or what was your favorite puzzle?
I did not do puzzles as a kid because I wanted to be an inventor. So I had decided in 2nd grade that I wanted to be an inventor. I love science. I truly wanted to be an inventor. And now when you think about it, trying to invent a perpetual motion machine is a puzzle, right? You're trying to figure out, how to take, this physical property and this and all that. And so I wasn't that I was into puzzles that were in the newspaper, although I do remember my grandfather playing the Jumble. I was aware of the Jumble. But my passion was more science-oriented puzzles. I used to think about the moon falling toward the earth and the earth getting out of the way. And I completely had a respect for puzzles, but my type of puzzle was, more on the inventing side.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, actually. When you look at the history of puzzles, it was, I think, the 1890s in Liverpool, England, when a guy named Arthur Wynne, who was actually a journalist, put together what's credited as the first crossword puzzle. I'm just wondering, did you ever study him? Did you ever study puzzles in school, or how'd you get into this?
No. So what happened was, throughout my whole life, I wanted to be an inventor. So after living in Southington, we ended up moving to Florida. And then I ended up moving to Chicago as a young adult. And I worked on the Chicago Board Options Exchange. And there was a guy in the IBM pit, in the options pit, who had invested in a company in Chicago that invented and licensed games. And they had just licensed a game to Hasbro, and I was friends with him. I was asking questions. I'm like, what? You can invent games and make money? Are you kidding me? I literally gave up within weeks. I gave up my job. I gave up everything I was doing and declared I want to be an inventor. Now, I have always had a strong appreciation for words. I just feel that words can start wars, they can stop wars. The power of putting words together, in a certain way just has an incredible power. I said, I'm going to be an inventor. So, my love of words got me wanting to invent a word game. And my first word game was something called Crossword the Game. It was at that point that I studied all about crosswords, as much as I could take. I solved crosswords, I played crosswords, to make this game, which I actually was able to license very quickly to Parker Brothers. So all of a sudden I felt like I was a word game inventor. I mean, it was just amazing how it all transpired. But what happened is Hasbro had bought Milton Bradley. And then the people at Milton Bradley put the kibosh on my Crossword the Game because they thought it was going to compete against Scrabble. And that was Parker Brothers' reason for actually taking the game to have something to compete against Scrabble. So I learned a very valuable lesson right off the get-go. And that is that, even though, the games get licensed and they start to go into production, doesn't mean that they're going to come out. It's a lot like a TV show. But what it did was it entrenched me in the word games. I fell in love with word games and word puzzles like I couldn't believe. Then I had an idea for a board game based on Jumble. I walked down to the Tribune Tower. I lived only about a 15-minute walk from there in Chicago. And I walked in the door and asked to meet with the head of licensing. And then I just kind of never left. I was been working with them ever since. And then when Mike Argerian retired from the Jumble, I was the logical choice to take it over because I had already done Jumble Crosswords, TV Jumble, Jumble Brainbusters, and I was their go-to guy for all this stuff. So it was not playing as a child that got all this going. It was actually giving up everything I was doing as an adult that got all this going.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question because I'm just curious about this. I am a reader also of the funny pages, have been for years since I was a kid, and every so often you see them have guest cartoonists come in, and you do this too with Jumble. I guess you're either maybe taking a week's vacation or something where you let somebody else come in and do your Jumble for you. Is that sort of a honorable routine or tradition in the cartoonist area?
Well, I don't know about for other cartoons, but the reason this came about is Jeff Kanarick, who's the cartoonist for Jumble, who I think is one of the best cartoonists in the world and just getting better with every cartoon. He arranged this. So I would prefer not to have this because I love making the Jumbles. I never go on vacation. If I'm on vacation, I'm still looking for Jumble ideas. But, I do like that week where somebody else is drawing the cartoons and coming up with the answers. But quite often, Jeff and I are helping them with ideas and things like that. But Jeff is very entrenched in the cartoonist world, and he goes to all the cartoonist meetings and things like this. So those are his friends that he's made, and some of them are, very well known. And we do it every November, and Jeff organizes it every year, and it's kind of fun for everybody. We love it, and we think it'll just continue forever.
A couple of quick process questions I just have to ask. How far in advance do you do a Jumble? I mean, are you waiting up, one night and saying, gee, I got to get next week's done, or are you done a month or two in advance?
So this is actually standard in the industry. It's 6 weeks. So that's for cartoons, that's for everything. And the reason why is if one of us were to get injured, ill, we had to spend some time in the hospital, they need some leeway.
David, you're a human just like all of us. You must occasionally suffer from writer's block.
I do, but not very much. I just don't. I go into this weird trance. And, a lot of the ideas I get for Jumbles, it's not just me sitting around. It's me at a restaurant overhearing something. It's me seeing a sign. There's a Jumble that Jeff and I turned in today that its origin was a daily specials sign at a breakfast restaurant. And I thought, this would make a great puzzle. So, I have the world helping me, and I obviously could ask for help because every day I get somebody wanting to submit, an idea, and I have the standard email that I send back. I'm so sorry, but for legal reasons, we're not allowed to take outside submissions. But the truth is, that is true, but the reality of it is, coming up with the puns is so energizing for me. And if I were just having to come up with words to go with other people's, puns and all that, it would seem like a job. I don't want it to seem like a job.
No, and it's really very brilliant, very clever, and I'm not just blowing smoke at you. It's really remarkable how you and Jeff work together to pull this off, because it just comes together every single puzzle. And I'm always admiring that, and the fact that, how do you do this day in, day out? But, as much as you're a puzzle guy and you've done your puzzles, what's really driving you from what you yourself say or told me before we started recording was that your true love is childhood education. I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so now this goes back to Connecticut. Like I said, I went to a very good school in Cheshire and then an equally good school in Southington. And then I got a chance to be part of the Talcott Mountain Science Center and Academy. There was a program that they were doing for certain students who were doing well, and 10 of us would go up to the Talcott Mountain Science Center, and we would make holograms. We would look through telescopes, and it energized me. So this was in 8th grade. And I don't know if any of your listeners are aware of what, the Talcott Mountain Science Center and Academy is, but it is amazing. It's spectacular, and it was a life-changing thing for me. The teachers there, I only went there, I think, maybe 3 different times, but, its effect on me was just incredible. So, like I said, we built things that I couldn't even believe we were building, with magnets and with lasers. I remember building a hologram with lasers, and I think about it all the time. I could tell you exactly what the weather was outside, what I was wearing. It was just that big of a thing.
So obviously education means a lot to you, and in fact now you've started something called the David L. Hoyt Foundation with your wife, and you've invented these 2 really cool collaborative puzzle games that kids play in teams, and they're gigantic. They cover the floor, and the kids have to move these pieces around. It's really very cool. I've seen a video on it. And what you're doing with this foundation now is to try and bring these games that teach kids about words and teach kids how to work together collaboratively. You want to bring this to as many children as you can around the world.
We were able to play them in Chicago with teachers and librarians, and it's so fun for me to work with kids, and the games are still played, like at this school at Sleepy Hollow, New York, where that I work with every week. And we thought that because these games were so amazing and so wonderful that we would be able to get people to help us get them into schools and libraries, but it really is proving to be very, very difficult. And so now what I've decided to do is I'm going to try to make as much money as I can, not because I want to buy cars and houses and things like that, but it's because I want to buy these games. There's a few of them, but the 2 main ones are Giant Word Winder and Giant Math Winder. And I would like to see these games in every school and library in the world. We have some in India. We have some in Brazil. I went to Tanzania to work with 800 students at one school playing these games. And I just realized that I'm going to have to be the funding for this. It's too hard to explain how good these games are and to get people all on the same page. So I've been working really hard with my amazing partner in Germany, to develop new apps. And the goal is to make enough money so that I can really work more with kids and the giant games and teach these kids the power of words and knowledge and all that. So that's the long-term plan.
That wraps up this episode of Amazing Tales from Off and On Connecticut's Beaten Path. You know, one thing David says he misses about Connecticut is its numerous rock walls, something he didn't have when he lived in Florida and then in Chicago. But now in his Seattle area home, he's had a few truckloads of granite shipped there from Mount Rainier, and he's built his own stone wall. He equates it to building a real-life puzzle, only one made out of rocks instead of words. I want to thank our guest for today's program. He is David L. Hoyt, this country's leading syndicator of daily word puzzles. The answer to this week's trivia question, the question was, he delivered the peace treaty to General Pershing in World War I, dodging German bullets while speeding along on his motorcycle. Who was he? The answer is Carlton Stevens. Carlton called Ridgefield, Waterbury, and Thomaston his home at different times in his life. Next week on Amazing Tales CT, you're going to hear the story of this incredible man. He may not be exactly a household name, but his exploits, heroics, and accomplishments, I'm certain you're going to come to appreciate. Amazing Tales from Off and On Connecticut's Beaten Path is a production of True North Associates, LLC. This is Mike Allen. Be safe, and please stay healthy.